Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea prepares to start its nationwide vaccine campaign this Friday. The first batch of doses, enough for close to 800,000 people, are being distributed to clinics and hospitals. The Bank of Korea decides to keep its key interest rate where it is at 0.5%. It's raised its forecast for inflation this year, though, to 1.3%. And the South Korean government's proposed fourth round of relief payments for small businesses and freelancers comes in at around $17.5 billion. That amount and the size of the individual payments are due to be finalized this coming weekend. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea will be starting its nationwide vaccination campaign tomorrow. And today, vaccines are arriving at hospitals and clinics. The initial batch will be enough for close to 800,000 people. For more, let's turn to our Ji-young, who's at a clinic south of Seoul. Ji-young, how are the preparations going there on the ground?
Devin, I'm outside a health center in Suwon City, Gyeonggi-do Province, and this is where some of the first inoculations will be administered at 9 a.m. sharp on Friday. The first doses of COVID-19 vaccines developed by AstraZeneca arrived here at around 9 a.m. this morning and are stored here ready to be administered. The truck with the vaccines arrived under escort by the military and police. In front of the main gate, health center officials and guards checked the exterior of the container carrying the vaccine to see whether there were any problems during the delivery. Soon, the vaccines were carried into the health center, but the press were not allowed to go in with them. The vaccines will be kept at 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, which is on the lower end of the required range for this particular vaccine of 2 and 8 degrees. The vaccines received at this particular center are enough to inoculate about 500 people and will be administered at around 22 health centers and care homes. Nationwide, shots are carefully being delivered to some 1,900 health centers and care homes today. They're being protected by firefighters as well as armed military personnel. And they're being transferred using cars and trucks fitted with refrigerated containers from the distribution center in Icheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. About 1.57 million vaccine doses, enough to inoculate 785,000 people, are to be delivered across the country. In order for the vaccination process to begin smoothly on Friday, South Korea's health authorities are closely monitoring the situation. Take a listen.
At the health center, we have a refrigerator just for the vaccines. An auto call function is installed so we can closely monitor the situation 24 hours a day.
Those first in line to be vaccinated are residents and staff at these care centers and hospitals, but only those under the age of 65. The number of eligible people in the country who are willing to be vaccinated is about 289,000, including those at nursing hospitals and rehabilitation facilities, making up about 94% of the entire eligible population. Those who can visit will be vaccinated at the health centers, and medical staff will be visiting care centers and rehabilitation centers where doctors are not present. This is all I have for now, and I'll bring more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Ji-young there reporting for us live. Thank you for that. Now, South Korea today reported fewer than 400 new cases of COVID-19, a decline from yesterday. There are still concerns about an expected rise in cases, though, from the recent Lunar New Year holiday. Also, on Friday, the health authorities plan to announce revisions to the social distancing rules. A big question is whether they'll keep the ban on gatherings of 5 or more people. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea reported 396 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, down 44 from the previous day. Of the daily new cases, 369 were locally transmitted and 27 were from overseas. This now brings the country's total caseload to over 88,500. Most of the recent infections are from the Greater Seoul area, with Gyeonggi-do Province reporting the most at 132, followed by the capital with 114 and 22 in Incheon. Outside of the Seoul capital area, other regions report fewer than 20 cases each. While the virus cases appear to be slowing down, health authorities remain vigilant over another possible wave of infections following the nation's eased virus measures. The Greater Seoul area is under Level 2 social distancing measures, and the remaining regions are under Level 1.5 measures. The current measures will be in place until Sunday, but on Friday, health authorities will announce a new set of guidelines. Attention is focused on whether the government will extend its ban on gatherings of 5 or more people. Meanwhile, the country's first COVID-19 vaccines are being delivered to health centers and nursing facilities across the nation. While deliveries are being made as scheduled, a batch of AstraZeneca's vaccines are in question after delivery truck was unable to keep the jabs under optimal conditions. The temperature of the container was reportedly at 1.5 degrees Celsius, slightly lower than the recommended temperature of 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said that the delivery truck returned to the distribution center in Icheon, Gyeonggi-do Province, and a new batch of vaccines carried by another vehicle was safely transported to Jeju Island. The KDCA has yet to decide whether to discard the returned vaccines. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea has decided to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at a record low of 0.5%. The BOK is also calling for GDP growth of 3% this year and 2.5% next year, the same as in its last forecast in November. As for the inflation outlook, it's been revised upwards to 1.3%. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
South Korea's central bank has kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged at a record low of 0.5%. The decision, made during the bank's monetary policy meeting on Thursday, comes despite recovering exports and facility investment, with private consumption still weak from the COVID-19 pandemic.
The domestic economy is recovering modestly, mainly led by an increase in exports, and the vaccination program is set to begin in our country. But we decided to keep the rate steady, as uncertainty surrounding the economy remains high amid the pandemic.
The Bank of Korea cut its key interest rate to 0.75% last March and lowered it once more to a record low 0.5% in May last year. The rate has remained unchanged since then. The central bank on Thursday also kept its domestic GDP growth forecast for this year at 3%, the same as the previous forecast. It also left the growth forecast for 2022 unchanged at 2.5%.
We decided to maintain the growth forecast for this year. This is because even though the global economy is expected to expand, infections in our country this winter were worse than expected, and we're seeing rather subdued employment figures.
On the other hand, the inflation forecast for this year using the Consumer Price Index was raised to 1.3%, up 0.3% from the previous forecast made last November. But one expert notes it's unclear whether this inflationary trend will continue, as the current trend is not entirely reflective of the overall economic conditions.
The inflation is centered around groceries and global oil prices, so it's not necessarily inflation reflecting the overall economic conditions. It's mostly from the pressures on the supply side.
The BOK reiterated that the future economy is heavily dependent on how the virus situation unfolds, including the speed of vaccine rollouts, and vowed to continue its accommodative monetary policy. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
The official proposal for the South Korean government's fourth round of relief funds for small businesses and freelancers has come in at 19.5 trillion won, which is around 17.5 billion US dollars. That's according to Yoo Dong-soo, a deputy chief of the ruling Democratic Party's policy committee, who told reporters Thursday that that's the amount the government has submitted to Parliament. The amount individuals will get under the plan, however, though, has not been decided. The government and the Democratic Party will hold a high-level meeting to set those amounts this Sunday before a vote on it as soon as next Tuesday. You said that of the 19.5 trillion won, less than 15 trillion will be funded through the issuance of state bonds. And some new data out on employment. Statistics Korea says that in the third quarter of last year, there was an increase from a year earlier of around 370,000 jobs, thanks in large part to government hiring. Jobs for those in their 60s increased by over 340,000, but among people 39 and younger, there was a decline of 150,000 jobs. One of the industries hit hardest was manufacturing, where employment was down more than 21%. Because of the pandemic, the number of jobs in the food and accommodation went down as well. The government last year hired a large number of people to help them through the pandemic, many of the new hires senior citizens. Seoul City's Smart Map, which is online and shows everything from vegetarian restaurants to cultural facilities, has added several new features. The Smart Seoul Map was updated on Thursday so that visitors can find dining establishments to support that offer free meals to underprivileged children and stores that donate a portion of their sales to charity. It also now features trails suitable for people with disabilities. Not only that, the map shows the locations of COVID-19 screening centers in 3 different languages: English, Chinese, and Japanese. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, today, as expected, the Bank of Korea decided unanimously, as it turns out, to keep its key interest rate where it is at a historic low of 0.5%. It's where it's been since last July. So tell us about that and how long you think that'll remain the case.
As widely expected from market, Bank of Korea maintained the benchmark interest rate at 0.5% today. Actually, leaving the key interest rate at 0.5% level would be the only available option to Bank of Korea as of now. Inflation pressure is slightly intensified recently, as we have seen previous report of oil price increase. But the central bank can't adjust interest rate because yesterday U.S. Fed Chairman Powell clearly confirmed his expansionary monetary policy with both of zero interest rate and ample liquidity supply. All these mean that Bank of Korea will leave interest at 0.5% level until U.S. Fed begins to adjust its key interest rate in 2023.
And now the BOK is also keeping its GDP growth outlook for this year at 3%, but it's raising its outlook for inflation to 1.3%. So what do you make of these projections, Professor?
Bank of Korea's economic growth forecast for this year is maintained at 3%, which is the same as previous forecast released in November last year. If we take a look at domestic economic situation, increasing export is helping to recover economy, but still domestic consumption, which covers 60% of GDP, is still weak with negative growth. Also, oil price, other natural resources price, and agricultural product prices are all increasing quickly from the end of last year. So it is why Bank of Korea raised the inflation forecast by 0.3% up to 1.3% on annual basis.
And turning to the markets, stocks on Wall Street had a nice bounce back overnight, the first major movement we've seen in that direction for a few sessions. Fed Chair Powell easing some concerns about inflation with his testimony. What's the story there on Wall Street?
U.S. stock turned higher Wednesday after Fed Chairman Powell signaled that the Fed is not about to change its monetary policy, and that helped push the Dow Jones Industrial Average to a record. Dow Jones increased by 1.4%, and Nasdaq also increased by 1% yesterday. And all Asian markets and European markets had positive returns over yesterday and today. Of course, these positive returns are much affected by U.S. Fed's easy monetary policy for the next 2 years.
And Korean stocks recovering all of yesterday's losses and then some. The Kospi surging back today almost to 3,100 points with a gain of 3.5%. Similar moves on the other indexes. Tell us about the local markets.
As expected, inflation increases and U.S. Treasury bond rate goes up. There was a huge drop in domestic market yesterday with negative 2.5% return in Kospi. But today, domestic market fully recovered yesterday's loss with 3.5% return in Kospi and 3.3% return in Kosdaq. This quick recovery is also powered by Chairman Powell's easy monetary policy confirmed in U.S. Congress testimony.
Right. All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks, as always, for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.